Over the last decade, organised crime from Eastern Europe has been spreading west across the continent, enriching gang bosses in Russia, Romania and elsewhere, and giving law enforcement a serious challenge. But who controls these new mafias, and how exactly do they operate? Two French filmmakers, Jérôme Pierrat and Barbara Conforti, went behind the scenes to find out.
A small town in southwest France. It's around 5 in the morning and most people are still in their beds. But a unit of gendarmes, the country's paramilitary police, are up early. This is Operation Caucasus 31. Its targets are gangsters from Georgia in Eastern Europe, believed to have carried out a string of burglaries and robberies across the region. 23 suspects are arrested. The police recovered jewelry and cash worth more than €1.5 million. But the gang's bosses are well out of reach, part of new organized crime networks now spreading across the continent. These are two more East Europeans. In broad daylight in a busy French town, they're installing a fake keyboard to obtain the PIN numbers of all the people that will use this cash machine. The ploy works until a customer suspects there's something wrong. One of the thieves who's watching close by comes up and offers to help, but the customer leaves to phone the police. The two suspects dismantle the keyboard as quickly as they'd installed it and disappear. Hundreds of cash machines are being pirated like this in France every year. Inside the offices of the Cybercrime Squad, Commissioner Adeline Champagnat explains with the use of confiscated material how the hackers work.
Donc vous avez deux méthodes pour récupérer ce code confidentiel, ou bien la méthode du faux clavier, voilà derrière comment c'est fichu, donc toutes vos frappes clavier vont être enregistrées. Ou bien la méthode de la réglette, qui va, elle, comporter une mini-caméra qui va donc filmer, une fois posé sur le distributeur automatique de billets, le code confidentiel que vous composez.
The suspects install the strip and the camera in the blink of an eye. The video can roll for hours at a time. This is what it records. Getting the PIN code is just the first step. The thieves also need all the details of the bank card itself. They build a fake mouth, known as a skimmer. It's a case containing a mini magnetic recorder.
Qui va être piraté, donc c'est ça, c'est ici qu'on va disposer le système de skimmer, qui va permettre, lui, de récupérer les coordonnées bancaires qui sont sur votre bande magnétique. Voilà.
A skimmer, a strip, and fake keyboard. It's the perfect bank card cloning kit. Many of the card pirates are Romanian. One of them agrees to talk to us if we conceal his identity. Ionut, not his real name, has been trawling around Europe for 8 years, following instructions from his bosses back home. The details that have been hacked through the ATMs will be copied onto virgin cards. Ionut shows us how it's done.
Moi, je te donne ma carte.
He puts it through his skimmer, which closely resembles those on the cash machines. He now has all our personal details in his computer.
Pentru că ți apare Jérôme Pierrat, numele de la tarjetă. Absolut toate datele tale. Toate numerele, absolut toate 16, plus fecha de expirare a tarjetei, absolut tot pus în calculator. Deci, o vezi, e o tarjetă virgină, o luăm și o tragem prin pisică, cu banda magnetică în jos, întotdeauna. Perfect.
That's it. In just seconds, all our personal information is on that card. Ionut will give the fake cards to his gang, who will use them to buy goods and withdraw cash. Always on the move, it's hard for the police to track them down. And the big bosses, ever prudent, stay back home in Romania and rely on gang leaders such as Ionut to carry out their scams.
Deocamdată eu sunt în Franța, dar depinde cum ne trimite șeful. Poate să fim grupul meu, poate să fie mâine în Italia sau poate să fie în Anglia. Nu se știe niciodată. Unde sunt codurile mai bune, acolo ne trimite. Eu câștig cam 3-4 mii de euro pe lună. Deocamdată nu vreau să o las, pentru că e o meserie de viitor.
Romanians didn't get involved in cybercrime by chance. The country has good IT technicians, but with unemployment high, the mafia has seized an opportunity. This is Craiova. Its electronics college is well known, and in communist times turned out legions of IT engineers, many of whom are without work today. Craiova is also infamous for its crime. It's dubbed the Palermo of Romania. Rife with arrests, underworld killings, and ATM skimmer gangs. The skimming is run openly by a handful of godfathers who effectively rule the city. Together they form an alliance known as the Brotherhood. Cimino, Gijoc, Kayak, Mavrikie, Rosiano, and Magaru have all been accused of arms trading, extortion, money laundering, and other financial frauds. Proud of their achievements, they are happy to show off their wealth in public, as these home videos seized by the police clearly show. They may look united, but occasionally the Brotherhood breaks down. In December 2008, Catalin Mavrikie arrived in hospital covered in blood. Mavrikie had a 15-centimeter slash in his face. Later it emerged that he and Kayak, the most powerful of the bosses, fell out over a game of poker. Kayak was killed. Today, Mavrikie is behind bars in the city's high-security prison. Special permission was needed for an interview. He was sentenced to 25 years for Kayak's murder.
Și el a scos sabia, eu am scos pistoalele și din discuții a vrut să-mi dea cu sabia în cap, dintre care a vrut să-mi dea în cap și m-a nimerit aici pe față și la disperare am tras unde am nimerit.
The crime boss told us how he started by pirating bank cards in Europe.
Și clonai cărțile. Erau niște, cum să spun, niște piese, niște aparaturi electronice care le clonai pur și simplu. Le clonai și...
He admits pillaging bank accounts, but denies he's a member of an organized crime gang.
Toți am fost niște interlopi cum ne-a făcut televiziunea sau cine ne-a făcut, dar acum rămâne la aprecierea cine măsură să consideră dacă noi eram interlopi sau eram oameni de afaceri. Pentru că și eu aveam o afacere, la rândul meu aveam un casino deschis, aveam o ocupație, aveam niște angajați care plăteam impozite la stat. Aveam ocupație. Judecătorul care m-a condamnat m-a făcut că eram interlop, că eram recidivist, n-aveam ocupație.
Kayak's friends never forgave Mavrikie for killing his fellow boss and have ostracized him. The Godfather's funeral was given extensive coverage on the TV news. More than 1,500 people, including many from the city's mafia gangs, came out onto the streets to pay their last respects to one of their own. Magaru, which in English means donkey, is now seen as the new head of the Brotherhood and the man believed to run much of the bank card pirating in Europe.
El este bossul în Craiova, el a rămas. Era prieten cu Kayak și a rămas el acum. El are relații, peste tot are bani mulți. Știți cum e, în România cu bani faci multe. N-ați văzut la televizor, corupție mare.
Back in southwest France, the gendarmerie's crackdown has led to the winding up of the Georgian criminal network. But the police know the 23 arrested men have all been following orders from their bosses in Eastern Europe.
Une année de naissance, 78, et sur d'autres documents, 79.
Jean-Luc Spady heads up the inquiry. After several months, he's been able to work out how the gang functioned.
Ce sont toujours des petits voleurs, donc pris un à un, on n'a pas l'impression qu'on a affaire à un grand circuit international. Or, lorsqu'on les met bout à bout, ces petits voleurs travaillent pour un même chef, qui est situé au niveau régional, et ce même chef récupère tout le butin.
Some of them burgled properties and committed robberies. Others were responsible for getting rid of the stolen goods. All worked under the supervision of their local gang chief, a man called Zurab. Zurab was in turn responsible for passing on the profits to his superiors elsewhere. In the basement, the gendarmes sift through the seized goods. A mass of jewelry and gold. The thieves had started preparing it to fence it by weight. They'd removed ornaments and precious stones. On this table alone, there's 7 kilos of gold, originally bound for diamond dealers in Antwerp.
Le receleur monte une fois par semaine environ en Belgique pour de 30 à 70 000 euros de récupérer. Donc sur une période, on va dire de un an et demi, on a plus que des centaines et des centaines de milliers d'euros qui sont récupérés.
The godfathers behind the network are known in Russian as the Voriv Zakon, which translated means thieves in law. It's a criminal elite that developed inside the Soviet labor camps and which today controls the Russian Mafia. The Voriv Zakon are distinguished by tattoos of an 8-branched star on their shoulders and a cross on their ring fingers. The tattoos are symbols of their authority. To become a Vor requires being accepted by other mafia bosses. Their code of honor insists that they don't hide their status, even from the police. The Voriv Zakon sit atop a criminal pyramid. At the bottom are the foot soldiers, the chestiorki, the thieves overseen by the gang leaders. Above them are the palogenets and the smotriarchi, who organize affairs and do the accounts for the Voriv Zakon. Two of the Vor dictating orders to the burglars in France were Lasha Sushanashvili, a Georgian known as the King of Burglars. He was arrested in Greece in 2012. And Zakhar Kalashov. Aged 59, he's one of the senior Voriv Zakon. His speciality is racketeering and gambling. He's now serving a 9-year prison term in Spain for money laundering, but used to run casinos in Moscow and Georgia. The two men extended operations to West Europe to escape the tough crackdowns in their own countries. Georgia. Over half of the world's 700 Voriv Zakon come from here. From the end of the Soviet Union until 2003, they ruled here virtually unopposed. Then came the Rose Revolution and the election of a new president, Mikhail Saakashvili. 2 years after coming to office, he made a pledge in parliament. The fight back had begun. Saakashvili introduced severe new laws and penalties against the Vori and confiscated their possessions. One of the first villas seized belonged to Zakhar Kalashov, the Vor suspected of masterminding the French network. The house now functions as the offices of a government agency. Ekas Gulaji is Georgia's Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs. She planned the attack on the Voriv Zakon.
It was one of the first houses we confiscated under the new law on criminal groupings. And at that time, the worth of this property was $30 million.
A 1,700 square meter villa with 20 bedrooms, and in the hall a lift with bulletproof glass.
All windows are bulletproof. everything is extra safe, secure. There were lots of golden ornaments, I remember, when I first visited. There are lots of entrances and exits in this house, I guess for escape purposes. And also another helicopter landing area on the roof.
The battle against the Vori was tough. They'd infiltrated every layer of Georgian society. A whole system had to be destroyed if the government was to be rid of the mafia.
We were doing it while half of the police was more respecting criminals than the new government. It tried to focus on taking down the institution.
One by one, the Vori were arrested using hardline tactics. The simple fact of belonging to the Mafia Brotherhood carried an automatic 7-year prison sentence. The authorities took full advantage of the Vori Zakon's own code, which made them honor-bound to admit their part in organized crime. Just how strong a grip the Vori Zakon had on society became clear when members of the public took to the streets to protest their arrests. Violent demonstrations took place even in court. Many saw the crime bosses as benefactors.
It was an institution, it was a very influential institution, effectively substituting the government on many levels. I mean, there were the tax collectors, there were the providers of the social services, there were the supreme judges.
For the most part, the government won its battle with the Vori. Today, 30 or so former godfathers are being held in this high-security prison in the capital, Tbilisi. Some 200 others managed to avoid arrest and fled abroad, mainly to Russia and Ukraine, to carry on their activities. But occasionally some return in secret. A contact, a Georgian gangster called Livan, informs us of a brief visit by a Vor. After much discussion, he agrees to take us to see a man known as Karandash. The Vor refuses to come to Tbilisi where he faces arrest, so we drive to his hideout, a hotel out in the countryside. When Karandash enters the room, he's with his right-hand man, Karat. Both men are cautious. Originally from Tbilisi, Karandash has spent 30 years in prison. The story goes he was made Vor Zakon in 1985 in a Soviet internment camp. A similar confession to the police is worth 7 years in prison. Karandash was born into a modest family. He began with burglaries. The two Vori Zakon are about to leave for another country. We try to find out where.
სადაც პოლიციის კონტროლი ისეთი გაძლიერებული იმით არ არის ფორმით როგორც დაუშვათ საქართველოშია უფრო იქიდან ალბათ იქით აფარებს სულ თავს რომ ცოტა უფრო თავისუფლად იგრძნო თავი.
But they say nothing more. The situation in Georgia is too risky and they remain cautious in front of the camera. Off camera, they suggest we head to the Ukraine. 2 months later, we fly to Kiev, capital of the Ukraine. It's minus 25 Celsius, and there's a thick carpet of snow. A driver picks us up at the airport. Livan, our Georgian guide, will meet us in a downtown bar. He's convinced his friends to talk to us.
Я хочу пригласить восходящую звезду преступного мира по имени Женя, который вам и вашему каналу расскажет все, что касается воровским понятиям воровской жизни и ихним обычаям. В связи с тем, что он отказался сделать съемки в этом месте, в этом баре, мы поедем к нему.
That night, we head out into the suburbs of Kiev. Evgeny is 32. He spent 3 years behind bars for burglary. In the criminal pyramid, Evgeny is Smotriarchi. A Smotriarchi is a lieutenant, the Vor's right-hand man. His job is to collect the cash for the Obshiak, a sort of collective fund. The financing comes from a mandatory 15% contribution of the value of the stolen goods from each of the gangs that's passed on to the Voriv's Vakon. The Obshiak is a kind of insurance scheme for the thugs.
Чать за общак, собирать, заниматься организационными вопросами, налаживать. Опять же таки, помощь идет и родственникам, и близким, если там человек, например, попал.
Evgeny has to check that everyone pays their dues, using force and murder if necessary. He has to keep track of the amounts and the dates when every group should be paying, usually on several small slips of paper such as these that gendarmes found on Smotriarchis working in France. Despite the Obshak funds from mutual aid, by far the largest part of the money ends up in the pockets of the Vori. It's common knowledge, but nobody questions it. There is total respect for the Voriv's Zakon.
Как бы вы понимали, вор — это то же самое, что президент и с внешней политикой.
Recruited while in prison by the Brotherhood, Levan shows up the mark of allegiance that ties him forever to his masters.
Es ნიშნავს სიკვდილი ძაღლებს, სიცოცხლე ძმებს. Мужик как раз сделал мне туда татуировку. Это случилось в камере в 1997 году с помощью туша, с помощью иголки с ниткой. Серьезные осужденные, видел вор, одобряли, и не было у меня никаких проблем.
The Vor's Vakon Levan respects the most is called Crystal. He's serving a 14-year term for attacking a customs official at Kiev airport. We wanted an interview, and Levan bribed officials to let the crime boss out for a few hours. Crystal had agreed to talk for the first time in front of a camera.
Я действующий вор в законе. Меня короновали буквально 4 года назад в России. Что означает быть вором в законе? Это, как бы вам сказать, король преступного мира. Это икона преступного мира. Вы можете представить верующего крестьянина, который молится на икону. И вот, если эта икона говорит, делай так, то ты делаешь именно так, и никак иначе. Понимаете?
C'est indiscret de lui demander comment ça se passe un couronnement.
У тебя нет по жизни никаких сбоев. И тебя крещеный. Вот все воры говорят «да». 3 человека достаточно, даже 2 человека достаточно, чтобы сказать «да, ты вор». И вот все. Потом идет объявка по лагерям, по зонам, что появился новый вор, допустим, как там, ну, то есть называется его имя, то есть его, как его дразнят в преступном мире.
Si quelqu'un ne l'écoute pas, qu'est-ce qui se passe pour lui?
Ну, как вам ответить? Таких людей просто нет. Мои слова никогда не поставятся под сомнение, это раз.
J'ai vu que sur un de ses doigts, il avait un tatouage. Il peut nous dire ce que c'est?
Это обозначает просто вор. Это крест, который несет вор в законе. Понимаете? То есть, если ты назвался вором, ты уже это до конца жизни. Вы понимаете? Это крест.
Crystal has to go back to his cell. He has another 9 years before he will be released. He has no intention of escaping, as he can handle business just as easily and safely behind bars.